This is the Revenue Pulse Show. We are back again with an interesting and exciting topic that I'm sure most of you have heard of over our social media platforms and on TV as well, and this is the tax waiver. We are going to find out what is it about this tax waiver, how is it being implemented, and who benefits from it. Is it you, the taxpayer? Is it a business person? Is it an informal sector person? We're going to find out in a few with our guest that we have today. My name is Elizabeth Nakuru. This is the Revenue Pulse. Thank you for joining us. Julius, you're welcome to the show. Kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Presenter. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, listeners out there, and those who are watching us from all corners of this country. My name is Julius Nandeva Council, and I'm the manager, Medium Taxpayers Office. I'm glad to be here on this presentation.
Julius, it's so good to have you on the show. Have you been on the Euro TV show before?
A number of times.
Okay, that's good. I think it's the first time you and I have been on the same show.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's good to always educate our taxpayers. You know, a lot of times people can hear something, but they may not understand it.
Truly.
So I think today we're just going to go deep into it and make sure that we leave this space when our taxpayers have understood what the waiver is about.
I agree.
So Julius, what is a tax waiver?
Like you've said, I am one of the URA staff who is out there in the trenches trying to educate our staff and our taxpayers about the tax waiver.
Okay.
This, we are calling it the golden opportunity because it only comes once in a blue moon.
Okay.
And because it is coming once in a blue moon, we want to call upon every taxpayer out there to take advantage of. One is that a waiver is like someone forgiving you a date.
Okay.
It is very rare that you have a date and then someone is forgiving that date. There must be so many considerations for someone to say, yes, I demand this much from you. I am legally entitled to collect this much from you, but I'm now going to forgive you part of it on a condition that you're able to pay part of it.
Okay.
So a waiver is a creature of the law. It is provided within the law. It is passed by Parliament when so many considerations have been made.
Okay.
So by the time they say we are forgiving you a tax that is due, it means there are so many considerations which we are going to actually highlight on why this waiver is very important.
Okay.
Aware that we are coming from a background of the COVID-19 pandemic and aware that so many businesses are struggling, we are thinking as government that if those that are demanded tax can be forgiven part of that tax, probably that has the potential of increasing their cash flows and of course allowing them to come back to business as taxpayers. And that is what we're going to talk about as a tax waiver.
Okay, so Julius, for a taxpayer who could be watching and they're not sure what is going on. Now, you've mentioned that government is saying, instead of closing your business and putting you out of action, pay part of what you owe, and then the rest can be forfeited and you continue carrying on business. So I think most people have this sense of URA is there to milk people, they don't give back. But I think this is a good offer. It's a good give back. So my question would be, is this the first time government is doing this?
Really not. Because usually government will have economic policies and usually these policies are meant to ensure that the economy is running smoothly.
Yes.
Now, you cannot have a policy where you want to collect taxes when the economy is not doing well.
Okay. Yeah.
So sometimes government has made commitments to pay certain taxes, especially for strategic sectors.
Okay.
And sometimes when they realize that these sectors are not doing well, the government can actually choose and say, yes, we know that we wanted to pay taxes on your behalf, but this tax liability can actually be waived off so that we actually start from a clean sheet.
Okay.
I will specifically talk about the waivers that have really impacted so much on a bigger scope of taxpayers. There is one that was given out in 2020.
Okay.
And this was also on the waiver of interest and penalty that was outstanding as at 30th June 2020.
Okay.
This was also targeting businesses that were struggling to actually pay their taxes. Now, how do we look at the tax as a whole? Tax is a composition of basically three things. It is a composition of the principal tax,
Yes.
plus the penalties, plus the interest.
Okay.
And I want to quickly educate the taxpayers about why interest and penalties are an additional cost to the business.
Okay.
If a taxpayer is compliant, if a taxpayer is able to file their return on time, if a taxpayer is able to pay their taxes on time, and if a taxpayer has been able to make full and accurate disclosures in their returns or declarations in their returns, then will not have an element of interest, will not have an element of penalty.
Okay.
For example, interest arises from the fact that a taxpayer has filed a return, for example, and has not paid the declared tax in time.
Okay, let me just interject you there a little bit.
Yes.
I would like a taxpayer to get this correctly.
Yes.
So I have a business. Let's take an example. I'm Elizabeth. I have Elizabeth Enterprises.
Yes.
So I have filed my returns,
Yes.
but I have not paid. That's
Yes.
when an interest comes in.
That is when an interest comes in, because interest is on unpaid tax that has become overdue.
Okay. So
Meaning
the
that if
penalty-
you pay your tax in time,
Yes.
then we will not charge you interest.
Okay.
Now, on the penalty, penalty comes normally when a taxpayer has filed their return late,
Okay.
or we discover that you did not file a return, we are issuing an assessment, and therefore we are penalizing you for not having done the right thing at the right time. And that's why even when we are preaching this waiver, we must preach it together with tax compliance,
Okay.
because we don't want to move from one point and then go back.
Okay.
Now, all the waivers that have come, the reason why we call this the golden opportunity
Okay.
is that now Parliament sat down and said every interest and penalty
Okay.
outstanding as at 30th June 2023
Okay.
is going to be waived as long as a taxpayer is able to pay that principal part.
Okay.
And we discovered that the interest and penalty part had actually grown so much that taxpayers are finding it so hard to pay it.
Okay.
And therefore, instead of demanding both the principal, interest, and penalty, in its wisdom, and Parliament, together with the government of Uganda, sat down and said, if we can forgive this taxpayer
Okay.
the interest and penalty, and then they are able to pay the principal, then we clean the books and start afresh. And that's where the waiver under section 40D of the Tax Procedures Code is coming from.
Okay.
At an opportune moment, I want you to allow me read the provision of this section. It is just 2 sentences, so that the people who are listening in are able to know exactly where we're coming from, and also be aware that this provision of the law has an expiry date.
Okay, let's just read it quickly.
Okay.
Where we are still at
Now,
it.
to all of you who are listening in and watching us,
Yes.
I want us to read that section verbatim so that you appreciate where we're coming from.
Yes.
So section 40D of the Tax Procedures Code provides under subsection 1 that any interest and penalty outstanding as of 30th June 2023, outstanding as at 30th June 2023, shall be waived where the taxpayer pays the principal tax by 31st December 2023.
Okay.
And subsection 2 says, where the taxpayer pays part of the principal tax outstanding as at 30th June 2023 by 31st of December 2023, the payment of interest and penalty shall be waived on a pro rata basis.
Okay.
Now, I want to briefly explain what that means.
Okay.
The law tells us that if I am able to pay all my principal tax, then I am going to have my interest and penalty outstanding as at 30th June 2023 waived.
Let me just interject you a little
Yes.
bit. You keep mentioning outstanding as at 30th June 2023. Now,
Yes.
I've been reading a couple of questions on social media, and one of the questions that stood out mostly is, now, is this for only people who have been assessed and they have a huge outstanding tax area, or is it also for people who are running businesses, but probably they incurred penalties and interest along the way due to maybe late filing or a mistake somewhere, and maybe something happened and they weren't able to pay the tax?
Okay. Now, where do the liabilities come from? Basically, liabilities come from two areas.
Okay.
One is that the taxpayer is able to declare their own liability in a return.
Okay. Yes.
That is called a self-assessment.
Okay.
And two, that when the taxpayer has not filed their own return or has filed their return but it is not complete and accurate,
Okay.
URA also has a legal mandate to issue what we call administrative assessments.
Okay.
So the liability could have arisen out of the taxpayer's self-declaration or from URA's administrative assessment.
Okay.
But we are talking about a liability that is already assessed.
Okay.
Now, we have situations, I don't want to forget this. We have situations where this tax is not yet known to URA,
Okay.
but the taxpayer would want to disclose that liability now.
Yes. And
So that they take advantage of the waiver as well.
okay.
So there's what we call voluntary disclosure.
Yes.
Voluntary disclosure is when URA has not assessed you, you've not declared on your own, but now you discover that in one way or the other, you made errors, you made some omissions, and you want to come out clean. Now, when you come out clean, it means you are not going to be charged interest and penalty if you come through voluntary disclosure.
Okay.
But if a taxpayer comes in this season between now and 31st and declares their tax liability,
Okay.
the interest and penalty is going to be calculated, but it will be automatically waived once the principal has been paid.
Speaking about that,
Yes.
the periods, I think people are having issues with the timeline. Someone said, URA came to my business and assessed me 3 years backwards. Am I still eligible for this tax waiver?
There are even audits that are actually running now.
Okay.
I'll give you a living example.
Yes.
If I completed an audit today and assessed the taxpayer, the assessment will be having the principal, it will have the interest, and probably will have the penalty.
Okay.
The question is, does this liability relate to a period before 30th of June 2023?
Okay.
If the answer is yes, and the taxpayer goes ahead and pays the principal, he will benefit from that waiver. So any liabilities that are outstanding prior to 31st of June 2023, whether they were declared by the taxpayer, whether they were assessed from URA, they qualify for the waiver as long as the principal has been paid by 31st of December 2023.
So if they were assessed, say, in September 2023,
Yes.
and even if they've been assessed 3 years backwards,
Yes.
they are eligible for this tax waiver.
They are eligible for the tax waiver of that was outstanding as at 30th June 2023. In other words, the liability that relates to that previous period. Because even if I conclude the audit today, I am actually saying that liability should have been due that time you ought to have declared it. So any interest that is arising because we are going back to the previous period. And therefore, by 30th June, we'll be looking at that part of interest and penalty that has not yet been paid. Because if you're paying now, it means you are not yet paid it. And therefore, it was outstanding. And if you're able to pay the principal, then we're saying that part of interest and penalty is going to be waived. Before I leave, before I actually conclude on this, you realize that there are taxpayers who have not improved their compliance even after 30th of June. And they are generating interest and penalty. That interest and penalty is not waived under this provision of the law. And that's why I want to empower the taxpayers as we actually waive the part of the interest and penalty that has accumulated up 30th of June 2023. Let's now do the right things. The right things are, I file my return in time, I pay my taxes in time, and then I will not generate any additional interest, I will not generate any additional penalties.
Yes, so speaking of tax compliance, a taxpayer is watching and saying, okay, I've understood tax compliance, I've understood the tax waiver is there, so how can they access this tax waiver? Where do they go?
The advantage with this waiver, like I've said, it is automatic. Because you're not even going to write letters to the commissioner or even commissioner general or even to the minister. By the way, there are those remissions where you have to go through the minister, and it has even been now taken to parliament, what we call tax remissions. And that's a longer process. But this time you're not going through that hassle. All you're going to do is get into your system, log into your account. After logging into your account, using your TIN and password, get into the payment under e-services. There is a payment platform. And as you're initiating a payment, the system has been crafted in a way that you're able to see your outstanding principal. And you're able to see the interest and penalties. And you're able to choose to pay the principal. Once you have paid that principal, just sit home and relax. What the system is going to do is that it is going to waive this interest and penalty that was outstanding as at 30th June 2023. You do not have to write your letters. You do not have to ask anyone for the waiver. It is going to be automatic. Yes.
You know, I appreciate that this has been made easy and simple. And I know that, like you said, you go to a web portal, log in with your details and go through the process. I think that is so much easier.
And it was intentional. Because we wanted to make sure that the taxpayers are finding it so easy. One, to understand their principal, but also be able to make a payment, and each payment they make should be allocated to their tax liability so that they're able to benefit from the tax waiver.
So, what does this waiver mean for business owners? I know that you mentioned a few of the benefits and how they are able to move on with their businesses, starting a clean slate, but what else is there in it for them now that we are rallying them and calling upon them to actually take advantage of this?
We all know, Ugandans out there, that cash is the lifeblood of every business. And therefore, when you run out of cash, you might not be able to actually continue with the operations, even when you have assets. But if you don't have cash, then you run out of the operations. That means that the cash that would have been used to pay your tax liabilities can now be re-injected in the business. There are taxpayers who were at the verge of closing because of certain enforcement actions from URA. For example, if URA has been demanding 1 billion from you, probably they are threatening to issue agency notice against your bankers. and you're looking at 1 billion not being on the account. So what do you choose? Probably you choose to get out of business. But here they are telling you out of 1 billion, probably 600 million is interest and penalty. So what do? Look for the 400,
Okay.
pay it up, and then the threats of business closure will reduce.
True.
The money that you should have paid interest and penalty, reinvest it.
Okay.
What does that mean? That we will be able to to support the businesses to come back again, put life to these businesses,
Okay.
and reduce the burden, because taxation is a burden, but it is the burden that is legitimate.
Okay.
That's why I'm saying after 31st of December 2023, we do not want to have this burden come back to the taxpayer.
Yes.
But it is painful that the deadline is fast approaching.
True.
And that's why we are intending today and for the days to come to preach this gospel to every taxpayer out there. Whether you have 100,000, whether you have 10 billion, whether you have 100 billion, as long as that 100 billion includes in some interest and penalty outstanding at the 30th of June 2023, then we'll be able to have it waived as long as you pay the other small part of principal.
Okay.
First of all, we are also aware that even when there is a waiver, there are businesses that could be struggling and might not be able to pay the whole sum of the principal. Do they have a benefit?
Okay.
The answer is yes, because the law also envisaged it that there are taxpayers who might not be able to pay all the principal. And therefore, if they are able to pay part of the principal, then the interest and penalty is also going to be waived on a pro rata basis. Pro rata basis simply means you had principal of 10 million. You have been able to pay, say, for example, 5 million.
Okay.
That is 50%. So it means also the interest and penalty will be waived 50%, so that you also get a benefit. I also want to call upon all the taxpayers, especially those who are disputing their ledger balances, those who are disputing their liabilities. They should not miss the opportunity simply because there are certain things that must be reconciled with their tax liabilities. I want to put it to them.
Okay.
Today, if you miss the waiver on 31st of December 2023, because you had a reconciliation matter pending with URA, you might not be able to recover that opportunity. But if you actually paid the principal that you know, which is not contentious, then it means you're able to benefit from the waiver, but also aware that these issues are going to be rectified within your ledger. So it gives you an opportunity. The calling is, as a taxpayer, don't sit down and say there is a pending reconciliation issue with URA and therefore I'm not able to pay the principal that I know. No, go ahead and pay the principal that you know. And probably you can put in an allowance for the interest that might arise, and then be sure that even when the reconciliation is done, the benefit comes back to you. Other than you waiting and then 31st passes and then the benefit does not come. There are also specific unique cases that are still in the pipeline. For example, the cases under the objections.
Okay.
There are taxpayers who have objected, but they are not sure about the outcome. So if they are not sure about the outcome, my prudent advice is pay the principal.
Okay.
So that when the outcome of the objection is positive to you, the credit remains on your account. But if the objection decision is against you, but you did not pay the principal, it means you'll not be able to enjoy the waiver.
You'll have
So any prudent taxpayer out there should be able to actually pay the principal if they are not sure whether they have strong grounds of objection, so that they shield themselves from the resultant tax that could arise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the way you've explained this very, very thoroughly. I feel like you've preempted my questions because I was going to ask you, okay, so can a small business person also apply? But you answered it when you said that whether you have a debt of 100,000 or a million or a billion, come, pay it up, and you should be able to enjoy the waiver benefits.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Julius, for being a part of the show. It was a good, thorough explanation. And I pray that our dear taxpayers will take it upon themselves to utilize this waiver and be able to actually benefit from it. Julius, thank you so much. You can maybe give us your parting shots and then you can have a good day.
Thank you, Madam Presenter, and to people watching us,
Yes.
especially the taxpayers. I want to emphasize that this Section 40D of the Tax Procedures Code Act is a golden opportunity for all of us as Ugandans. Not only investors, but everyone who has a tax liability. If you're not sure about your tax liability, please, you still have some days to 31st. Come to any nearby URL office and you'll be guided on your principal tax. Pay it before midnight of 31st December 2023. Because once it clocks midnight, the provision of the law will have expired. As URA, we are not sitting. Any reconciliation issues that need to be done will be done, but let not the reconciliation issues derail you from benefiting from the provisions of the law that is out here and is here for you. Pay your principal tax by 31st December and have your interest and penalties waived. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julius. Also, besides coming to any URL office near you, you can also go to our web portal. We have a touch point. You log on to it, and in case you have any questions, please get on there, raise a ticket. Your ticket shall be resolved as soon as possible. We have people on deck at the contact center also. They're ready to pick your calls. They're ready to answer your WhatsApp messages, and also your Twitter messages as well can be handled and responded to immediately. Don't feel like you have to move. If you can't move, you have your phone, you have some data, go to our website, use our social media handles, URA on Twitter, and also our WhatsApp number is also still on our social media platforms. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time. Bye. You stop?
Uganda Revenue Authority, developing Uganda together.